They call him the greatest footballer who never played, Carlos Henrique Raposo, aka Kaiser. The Brazilian had a glittering career in the 1980s without ever kicking a ball. From orgies with Berlusconi to gun-wielding gangsters, meet football's finest conman. Welcome back to The Upshot. I'm Jack, I'm here as ever. Zach is also with me.
Hello, Jack.
Hello, and clutching a caipirinha, Brazil's foremost expert on both football and identity crime, it's Roisin Lanigan.
Hello. I kind of wish I did have a caipirinha.
Yeah, sorry. Normally we do provide you with a silly alcoholic drink.
True. There's none today.
It's about 11 a.m, Roche.
Yeah, it's Friday.
Kaiser would probably have a caipirinha at 11 a.m, as we will
Right.
see, because he's a party guy, but, you know.
I mean, I don't know any. I'm quite scared.
Yeah, you're in the dark here. This is one of our weirder ones, but it's a really good story. It's a really good story.
I looked him up on Wikipedia and I'm like, no, I'm none the wiser.
None the wiser.
Oh,
Shall I sort of just briefly lay out the concept just so this makes sense?
Yes,
So
please.
this guy Kaiser, he basically faked his way into getting contracts at Brazil's top football clubs in the 1980s.
Right.
So mainly in Rio de Janeiro, there's like 4 big clubs, famous names like Flamengo and Botafogo, and he played for them all. He was on their books. But the twist is he avoided ever actually playing because he was shit at football. So he would feign injury or use other excuses and just run out his contract. Meanwhile, living this like wild playboy lifestyle, befriending all the players who loved him. And then he would up sticks and just do it somewhere else. And he lived a whole life like that.
That sounds like my dream. I
Yeah.
feel like I mentioned that in one of the other ones. Like, my dream is to become, like, if I was a professional footballer, to just always be on the bench.
Yeah.
Never
like,
have to actually
Never have to play.
found out, yeah.
Maybe do some, like, brand deals and I get the kit.
That's
Get the uniform.
almost exactly what he did. I mean, thinking of it now, I always think the substitute goalkeeper is a great role because that's basically what you do.
Yeah.
It's weird that he didn't try and become a goalkeeper, but I guess it's not sexy enough.
No, it's definitely not sexy. But this is basically like he's the football equivalent of like the personality hire.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's sort of just a vibes man that everyone loves. We'll talk about why they love him and what they get in return. Because there is some stuff.
Right.
Some of it quite seedy. But it's
it's sort of like Catch Me If You Can, is that
Yeah.
the name of the
Yeah.
film?
Yeah.
It's quite like that, but just in football.
Which I always think, for me, would just leave me gripped by paranoia and fear that I'd be caught out. But if you're the right sort of, like, libertine soul...
But is it an actual crime?
I don't think so. Maybe it's fraud.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's 1980s Rio. No one's thinking about that sort of thing. They're all
Wasn't
just,
his sort
kicking
of
back.
his logic behind it was that lots of footballers were sort of getting kind of scammed by clubs, like they'd like sell them this dream that they become a footballer and then it would never happen. So he was sort of being like, okay, I'm getting revenge for all of the what ifs in football.
He's the
all of
Robin Hood.
He sometimes
yeah.
says I'm the Robin Hood. I think that's a bit of a post hoc justification. I think he's just like, if it feels good, do it. And he's found his way in. I mean, we'll get into it more. Also, just want to give a shout out to the film documentary, Kaiser, the Greatest Footballer to Never Play, written by Louis Miles, which is excellent. Zach and I watched it in preparation for this. I'd actually say it's one of the rare cases where the source material is even more smutty than our pod.
Oh, good.
I mean, we're going to do the smutty bits. But the reason I say that is because it's got these really good reconstructions. You know, like some documentaries, they don't have good footage, so they just do loads of interviews or like illustrations, which never works in my opinion. These guys got an actor who plays Kaiser and just does these little scenes. And it's like, I mean, it's a lot of close-ups on his tiny Speedos and like bums on Copacabana Beach. But it's just so fun. It just really takes you to this like sweaty, sexy Rio in 1980s.
Like a sexy crime watch. So.
Yeah. Certainly sexier than crime.
That's the only reconstruction thing that I can think of.
Yeah, that is reconstruction.
The one thing that I did in preparation was I looked him up on his Wikipedia, which I always do when you tell me like hey, I'm going to do, and I like always scroll down to controversies. There's not a lot on his Wikipedia, so I was just like, maybe he's just a nice guy, and there'll be relatively few sex stories.
I think the
Friday
career
morning.
section is controversy.
Yeah.
Right.
Really.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the thing is also he is a nice guy. I think this is like a charming guy, but it's still 1980s Brazil
Yeah.
and football, so you know, different.
But
values.
I do like the concept of like, I mean, I suppose when you hire someone, you do think they're going to be better than they are. Usually in my case, like when I get hired
Jack's
for a job.
Jack just looked at me out of the corner of his eye there.
I have hired both of you in my lifetime.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Right, Zach, do you want to kick us off?
I do. So Carlos Henrique Raposo grew up in Rio. He grew up in a pretty poor, crime-riddled neighborhood. It was sandwiched between two favelas. And like most Brazilian kids, Carlos grew up playing football non-stop. He says he got the nickname Kaiser because other kids thought that he played like Franz Beckenbauer. At the age of 10, he gets scouted for Botafogo's academy. So Botafogo are one of the biggest teams in Rio. And while he's there in the academy, he manages to get pictures with Jairzinho, who's this Brazilian legend. He starred for them when they won the World Cup in 1970. And Kaiser says that as soon as he had this picture and brought it into school, everyone wanted to be his best friend. He was just suddenly the most popular kid in class. Eventually, though, he doesn't make the grade at Botafogo. So at 16, he moves to Mexico, signs for the Mexican side, Puebla. And, initially he's really excited to be there. He's following his career as a professional footballer. He plays a couple of friendlies for them. There are reports that he even scores a free kick. But very quickly, Kaiser discovers that his true passions are off the pitch. So shortly after he arrives, he gets a small injury and uses his time off to go out and explore Puebla a bit and discovers the nightlife scene there. So he's spending every night out in nightclubs, getting a lot of attention from girls just because he plays for the local football team. He'd go out in his kit. And
Studs.
Yeah, studs on, shin pads, everything. And he's loving it. He's having the time of his life, really. So when he recovers from this injury and goes back to training, it's a bit of an anticlimax, really, having to do all this running around and drills. So he comes up with a trick that will go on to become his trademark, faking injuries. So, he'd turn up to these training sessions, do a bit of running, but as soon as they got out any balls, he'd just go down clutching his leg and claim that, he's pulled his hamstring or something. And this is the days before MRI scans or anything. So there's kind of no way for them to check. Like if he said his leg hurt, then his leg hurt. And he manages to string them on for a whole year doing this.
So he never played.
He never played for them. So he just he'd turn up to training, do a bit of jogging for a couple of days, and then twist his ankle or something, be out for a few months, just down the clubs in Puebla, dancing. And then eventually eventually come back to do another few days of training and just get injured again. So he strings them along for a whole year. When they finally lose patience, they're like, look, Kaiser, I just don't think this is working out, and send him back to Brazil. And at this point, I think most aspiring footballers would probably realise that actually football isn't for me. Like I don't want this career. But Kaiser's had a taste for the lifestyle and he ain't given it up. So there's a quote from him around this time. He says, "I just wanted to be among the other players. I just didn't want to play." So,
amen.
It's basically, yeah. For some reason, Botafogo at this point decide to, this is his old club, take him back on a short-term contract, and Kaiser's over the moon at this. So he just goes in, collects his signing on bonus, and then obviously he had no intention of playing at all. So first day at training, my calf's gone. By this point, he's out partying every night. He hasn't trained. He hasn't kicked a ball for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
So he's actually just not that good at football anymore. And so basically, what he'd do is he'd do all the physical training. Like, he had the physique for it. He was fit. He could do the jogging. He could work out in the gym. But as soon as they brought out a bag of balls, then that was it. It was just like, he was just down clutching his leg. And he just kept on pulling this same trick at a whole string of Brazilian clubs, like and not even minor teams. Like, he was playing at Fluminense, Flamengo, Vasco da Gama, like the biggest teams in Rio.
So they're dropping big money on him, and he's not.
Well, I think not
enough
big
money to like go out in the
live the life.
Yeah, he's just sort of. He's funding his lifestyle, really.
What would like the English football equivalent of those clubs be?
I mean, these are the biggest.
These are like
clubs,
the biggest.
Arsenal,
These are biggest.
Tottenham.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
1980s and it's Rio, so slightly different like flavour, but
Chelsea.
Yeah, all those are the biggest teams. Some of the biggest teams in Brazil.
Yeah.
And was it always the same injury?
I think it was different injuries, I guess. Yeah, he had various tricks for it. So sometimes he'd bribe young players to injure him in training. He also enlisted a crooked dentist who'd give him sick notes.
What is the sickness that a dentist can sort of?
I don't know. I guess if you say that you
play with gum disease,
gingivitis, you can't play.
Sorry, I need a filling.
I don't know if you need root canal surgery or something. That's pretty bad. You're not going to be heading any balls.
He's involved in more people than I expected. I thought it was just like him, a little secret that he had. Like everyone kind of knew what he was doing. But if you're involved in like 14-year-old like junior players and also dentists, like surely everyone's talking about it.
As we'll see, he's involving half of Rio in this scam. Like everyone's sort of in on it.
I think I just wouldn't want to rely on. And then think about the amount of drinks you would have to buy. Like if you got someone to lie for you, and then you saw them in like all these nightclubs that he's in his full kit, you'd be like,
Yeah, where's my?
Yeah.
He's quite good at sort of spreading the love around, though.
Yeah, popular guy.
Yeah, they love him, as we'll see.
He also manages to weave this whole sort of Shakespearean drama of family tragedies that force him to skip training as well. You know, grandparents dying, parents dying, everything. And yeah, you'd think that after a while of this, clubs would start to get sick of his bullshit, basically. So Kaiser knew that if he was going to keep on blagging these contracts, then he'd have to give himself a backstory that actually contained some football achievements. And he was pretty lucky that he had a relatively common name, Carlos Henrique. So he used to carry around this bum bag filled with laminated newspaper clippings about other players called Carlos Henrique. So,
which isn't that subtle, is it? Like, if you were a famous footballer, would you carry a bum bag full of laminated newspaper cutting?
I was with him until this point, and now I'm quickly like, it would be easier to just become a good footballer.
Yeah,
like,
probably.
Classic cheating in the exams thing. Just do the fucking revision.
If you're at home, like with your laminator, like just go to training.
Yeah, he's just not good enough, though.
I guess, he's not good enough. And I guess when he goes along to these meetings with the next club that he's trying to sign for, they're going to be like, so what did you do at your last club? And if he can't say anything apart from, I did a few drills and then pulled my hamstring, then you got to come up with some.
And maybe back then, doing your own PR was a bit more common. Like now you have an agent with like a slide deck, but there probably was more of that. Like
you have your own
keep
Instagram.
And there's no Google, so you do need newspaper cuttings and stuff.
I don't know. What do you think? Like George
Laminated
Best was running around
George Best didn't need to.
like a backpack,
George Best didn't need to because he's the most famous player in the world,
or like
possibly.
Pele.
Again, but if you're like a bit more jobbing, I reckon you probably do need to have. You would have newspaper cuttings, I think.
I wonder if he's trying to prove that. So like when you're like at uni or when you're in a nightclub and you get talking to some fella who's inevitably like, oh, I almost played for Man United.
Trials.
I did trials for Arsenal, but then I got injured, and you're like, don't lie. So like if it's just like the modern day equivalent of being like no and like pulling up your Instagram.
Took it quite far though. It's not just chatting up a girl at you.
It's like we did that story a while ago about John Joe Shelby, the midfielder who plays for Nottingham Forest, who he like brought two girls back to his house after a night out and got up on YouTube at John Joe Shelby highlights reel.
It's just like him doing quite good passes. Yeah. What else is he doing then to
That was a key part of it, was telling these stories of other players' achievements. So in 1985 there was a Gremio player called Henrique who scored the winning goal for Brazil in the Under-20 World Cup final. So Kaiser passed that off as his own.
Is he just watching that, just rubbing his hands?
Yeah, he looked nothing like the guy apparently, but the tournament took place in the Soviet Union and it's the Under-20 World Cup, so people aren't that into it. Most newspapers didn't send a photographer, so they just have like a little blurb at the bottom of a column that was like, Brazil won Under-20 World Cup, Henrique scored in the final. Perfect. Just trim it out.
But you're right, there's no Google, so it's not as if he has a Google alert for his own name. He's got to be reading every paper.
He's across
front to back.
It's a very time-consuming thing running this scam.
Research intensive.
Another time, an Argentine side called Independiente won the Club World Cup, and on their bench was a young player called Carlos Henrique. So Kaiser stuck that on his CV as well.
Well, he's like, that's a typo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just missed off the age.
Generally
shoddy
people don't
journalism,
seem,
really.
there doesn't seem like many people with an eye for detail and 1980s Rio in this story.
Yeah.
Everyone's just quite like, okay.
I mean, we're going to come on to some of the club owners later.
Yeah,
You start to see why they're maybe not picking up on some of these things.
Do they not have like newspapers where you have people whose their beat is to complain about these clubs? You know, like they've got like Arsenal TV. Like, is there equivalent for that?
Very different relationship with journalists back then. So I was reading in the Kaiser, there's an accompanying book to the doc, also great. And he was saying that journalists and players were much more friendly. And if you said to the journalists, like, please, like off the record, whatever, like they would go along with it and just be like, what do you want to put in the paper? And they would all drink together and they become his friends as well.
Kaiser did this as well. So we had a few sort of tame journalists who'd fill their gossip columns with rumours that he was about to sign for big European clubs. He also had a fake mobile phone, which at the time, like, nobody had mobiles. They're pretty expensive. He had a plastic one that he'd fake these conversations in English and French to pretend that he was chatting to these big European clubs.
Could you be arsed with this?
Yeah, apparently he eventually got caught out because one of the team's physios actually spoke English. And we just like overheard him. It's like, what?
He's just going like, blah, 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 fish and chips. You plonker, Rodney. Crazy frog.
Yeah. But all the while, his teammates absolutely adored him. So, you know, he was, as you'd imagine, with somebody who is able to pull the wool over so many people's eyes. He's incredibly charismatic. He's really good looking as well. And he was always just around the club, like raising morale, being a real mascot for his teammates. And of course, without the demands of training and matches every weekend, he also had plenty of time to be the ringleader of the partying off the field.
Yeah. So, I mean, footballers are gods in Rio, even back then. I mean, footballers are gods everywhere now, but, you know, in 1980s England, it's a bit more like see them down the pub, whereas even then in Rio, they're like superstars.
So they're like separate to normal
No,
society.
they're sort of mixing in like the top nightclub things, but there's a bit more like, bit more sort of like, godlike razzmatazz and godlike status to it. I guess they're just sexier than your sort of average knuckleheaded centre back. And so Kaiser's scam is getting him access to this like superstar lifestyle where you're hanging with like famous actors and all that stuff. And at nightclubs, he's getting VIP treatment. So he's on first name terms with all of them, all the restaurants. He can blag free meals. Apparently, he's quite a big one for like, oh, I forgot my wallet, and they're just like, it's Kaiser, like, you know, this one's on the house. You play for Botafogo. He also carried ID cards for the teams. So if you've been to South America, it's very bureaucratic, actually. There's like ID cards for everything. And so players would have ID cards. So if ever anyone was like, are you a footballer? He'd be like, yeah, look, here's my Fluminense.
Well, you're like NGJ card for footballers.
Pretty much, yeah. So he had a bit of like relevant evidence. He's got his laminated newspaper cuttings.
Like, do you think he brings those out to the club as well? Just a whole like IKEA bag on his shoulder filled with.
Here are the cuttings. Yeah, one of those big folders that artists have. I mean, obviously, there's always a question of like, what is his precise motive here? Like, is it about living the footballer life? Kaiser, when he's interviewed later, says that really it's about getting laid. So he says, in the documentary, he says, my whole life has revolved around sex. There are no other hobbies. And he claims to have slept with over 1,000 women. There are some
I think there are a lot of other hobbies. He spends a lot of time sifting through newspaper archives.
The British Library.
He's an archivist, but that's not that sexy. So he has...
So I'm doing it for the shagging, loads of sex.
He's just a very organised man.
There is part of me that thinks the sex thing is a bit of a cover story for
Yeah.
He's more of a sort of, he's like a train spotter, really, for Carlos Enriquez around the world.
But he has just got this like ridiculous gift of the gab as well. Like, you know, obviously a con man kind of needs that, and he's amazing, has an amazing way with words. And so there are stories of like how he woos these famous actresses. There's one story where they're on Copacabana and there's this famous actress from the time, superstar there, and all his friends are like, none of us could get her, and Kaiser's like, I can. And they're like, yeah. So they bet him, you know, whatever. And they say, go on then. And Kaiser goes off and he's just like, he goes and talks to this little boy on the beach, and they're like, he's bottled it. And don't worry, it's not that kind of story. Don't worry. This is a
I was
nice
like, oh God.
Anyway, he talks to this boy on the beach, and they're like, "Oh, he's bottled it." He's talking to the boy, but then they see him go over near the actress, and he gets into the water near her on the beach, and suddenly he's like, "My watch! Where is it? That cost $50,000." And the actress is like, "Oh, what? We need to find your watch." And so they like look. She helps him look for a while, and then he's like, "Do you know what? Money is not important. There are more important things in life." And as he's saying this, the little boy comes up and is like, "Kaiser, can I have your autograph?" And apparently the actress is so impressed that they leave the beach hand in hand.
Oh my God.
So he's basically good at the sort of, I guess you'd now call it pick-up artistry, but it's a bit more fun back then.
Again, it's very intricate and elaborate.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if like he could just go up. He's a good-looking guy. You
Yeah,
understand? So
very good.
maybe he could just go up and be like, "Hello, I'm a footballer. You look really
Apparently
nice."
she was very hard to get, this actress, so you need to pretend to have lost your Rolex.
Yeah, but there's so many elements to that plot.
Yeah, well, that's like all good con tricks. You need
Yeah.
to know that you're not being conned.
I suppose also with the shagging thing, like again to go back to it, if people who do trials for shit clubs can get girls, then like surely it's not really that, there are plenty of really ugly losers who have said that they've shagged lots of women.
Right,
so
yeah.
does he need to do this? Like,
Well, I think it's the whole wider lifestyle of it. It's not
Yeah.
just about sex. But then again, he kind of makes out it's just about sex. So here's a quote from him. He says, "My dream when I was a kid was not to go to Disneyland. My dream was to go to Amsterdam, land of smut." And then it gets worse. He goes, what would I do in Disneyland? Go on a ghost train? Meet Mickey? I want to meet Mickey's wife, Minnie. If she's sexy, I'll come on her. Yeah.
It just gets more and more horrible, really. It starts out and he's this sort of like
Cheeky
lucky,
chappy.
like cheeky chap chancer sort of playing the game, and then it turns out he's just a vile sex addict.
that
Wants
is,
to
that
come
is
on Minnie Mouse.
Is Minnie Mouse an adult?
I think in his imagination she
Right.
is. There's no suggestion.
She's not
otherwise.
like
She's a
this,
mouse.
she's not even the sexiest one
No, at
from
least-
the Disney family.
Who are you going for?
What's the
Jessica Rabbit. It's kind
no.
of cheating, isn't it?
Bluebell, the cow?
Don't remember.
Is,
Bluebell.
or like, isn't she like she's got like checks? No.
I think Jessica Rabbit is the traditional choice.
Or Daisy Duck.
Well, famously, David Beckham fancies Tinkerbell, doesn't he? Because that's what he calls
Oh,
Rebecca
yeah.
Luce.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Tinkerbell's status is.
Oh yeah, that's
There is a
true.
chapter in the book. There is a chapter in the book that begins by explaining what the age of consent is in Brazil. And I was like, oh god, where's this going? But it's a bit of a red herring, fortunately. Yeah, I mean, look, it is 1980s Brazil.
I don't
Well,
think.
1980s anyway. It's football.
I think
It's a
if
different manner of talking. It's a macho world. I'm not excusing it.
I don't think it's particularly macho. I think in any country in any era, if your kid was just like, "Yeah, I want to spunk on Minnie Mouse," you'd be like, "Should we take him to see someone?"
I think fancying a cartoon character is like a normal part of your.
Oh yeah, the first person I ever fancied was Dog Tanyan, who he was like a dog who was one of the Three Musketeers,
Oh, of course.
and I used to pretend that he
D'Artagnan.
was my boyfriend, but I wasn't like, "Oh, I want to
I want
fuck
to
him."
jizz on him.
I was just like, "Oh, he seems really brave. I like him."
Yeah, Jessica
Who's yours?
Rabbit.
Who's yours, Jack?
I don't know. My wife has the Robin Hood, the fox Robin
Yeah,
Hood.
he's
Oh,
hot.
yeah.
Or Simba.
Maybe
Simba.
Oh, Nala from Lion King.
Oh, yeah,
she
Nala's
fucking
hot.
get it.
Fiona
She
from
not
Fiona from
Fiona?
Shrek.
Yep.
Which stage?
Both.
Free
Just
or post?
take whatever you can get, really.
She's lovely on the inside.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, but
that's the whole point,
there's-
isn't
as
it?
you said, there's being
just personality.
there's having a crush on one, and then there's
Yeah.
going to Disneyland. Rejecting the ghost train in favour of some.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, I think it's just his turn of phrase.
Also,
you know?
is Amsterdam the sexy? I suppose it's like got the red light.
It's got
district,
that
but-
rep, hasn't
yeah.
it? Well, what is? I mean, I'd say Rio's probably.
Yeah, I don't know if in my head, Amsterdam to me was like the Anne Frank house. And I don't know.
The
if I-
Rijksmuseum.
I
Great
know.
collection of Dutch masters. I think it's got that rep, hasn't it? It's like a stag do.
Yeah, I suppose.
And the weed thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way in which he woos football clubs, journalists, nightclub owners, very similar to how he woos women as well. It's his bank of evidence. So another tool in his armoury is these grainy VHS compilations, which he says are his best goals.
Does he carry these around with him?
Well, I think it's more like when you come back to his to seal the deal. He's like,
Does a John Joe
yeah,
Shelby.
does a John Joe Shelby and puts his YouTube compilation on, basically. I don't think he's like in the nightclub being like, have you got TV in the back that I could just bring a friend?
In the green room.
Obviously, these goals are being scored by other players. And there's one goal in particular that he uses a lot. It's this solo run by a Vasco da Gama player called Henrique, and it's against Flamengo. It's this very famous goal. And Henrique, like Kaiser, he looks really similar. He's tall, thin, he's got a mullet, and it's a grainy video. So a non-football fan would genuinely have trouble telling them apart. But then they would hear the commentary where it goes, "Gol de fantastico, Henrique!" So they're like, oh, it's him.
Yeah.
And, there's no way of checking. So he's just, it's just like, oh, here's my wonder goal. And so, for your uninitiated, you could see how quite easily you would believe him.
Is this a crime?
Probably not.
You can't.
Yeah.
Can you convince someone to sleep with you by pretending to be someone else?
Probably not anymore.
No. And I don't mean by being like, I'm a really kind person. I mean like by pretending to be like a literal famous person.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, it's weird because his entire life is
a scam.
a scam, a fraud. It's just, I don't know. I think it probably reaches the point where he kind of believes it himself.
Yeah.
Which is probably a quite deep psychological
Yeah,
defect.
I mean, there are layers here.
Yeah.
And we'll come on to how he even uses that story later in his life. But let's stay in the fun stuff for now.
Sorry.
He also becomes really close friends with some of Brazil's biggest stars because he's partying with all these footballers, he's playing with them, and they are friends, but he's also serving a few different sort of functions for them. Number one, he's kind of their pimp. So a lot of teammates love him because apparently he will just bring a load of girls to the party.
Right.
They often talk about him showing up with a bus of 15 or 20 girls. Don't know how he's blagged the bus. I bet he hasn't paid for it.
Didn't some of them say that when they had away games, they'd be staying in a hotel, and Kaiser was obviously injured, so he wasn't travelling, but he'd go to the hotel a few days earlier, book out the rooms on the floor below, and just get along loads of girls to stay in there.
And they'd all creep down and just have a big old orgy.
Paid?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, no. That's what I gleaned from the source material.
I mean, again, the sheer level of organisation.
Yeah.
His skills are wasted in this career. He could literally manage a football club.
Yeah,
Own a football club.
He's kind of a fixer for them.
Yeah.
But I think in a way, there are many ways of reading why clubs are keeping him on. But one of them is that you have these kind of fixers who you want to pay them, but you can't be oh, here's the team pimp.
Yeah.
So you give them a player's contract. And there's stories in other sports like basketball of we did Dennis Rodman episode and they signed his friend and they just called him the Rodman Whisperer, and he was just there to look after Dennis. It's kind of that idea. It's you are a bit of a fixer. I think some of these clubs know what's going on, but they have him on the payroll because he sorts all manner of things.
But they've never admitted.
Some clubs deny he was on their books, but we'll come to the end. There is documentary evidence of him being at these clubs. He'll take the rap for players. So at Fluminense, there's a night where one of the big name players knocks someone out in a nightclub. Ooh. And Kaiser's just yeah, it was me. Ban me. Because I don't want to fucking play. Perfect. And so he just takes the rap. It's good for the player. And then the player, I wouldn't say owes him something because I think it's a bit more friendly than that. But there's a...
Takes the fall.
Yeah.
Symbiotic relationship.
Right, yeah. Everyone needs a Kaiser in their life, I think. So apparently, the teammates, most of them are just fully aware of the scam, but they just love him, and he's got all these stories, and he's got that bus.
So are these teams doing well?
Yeah, I mean, he's at some of these clubs when they win the league. He doesn't get a medal because he hasn't played a minute.
Hasn't even kicked
He's
a ball
not
in
doing the John
training.
Terry.
No, well, I mean, he probably is quite involved in the celebrations, lifting the trophy first. So Bebeto, who's one of the greats of Brazilian football in the 90s, he won the World Cup in 94. He says, Kaiser's chat was so good that if you let him open his mouth, that would be it. He'd charm you. You couldn't avoid it.
Right.
So he's, gifted a gab. And no one loves Kaiser more than Renato Gaucho, who's one of Brazil's biggest stars. They say he is the first sex symbol in Brazilian football. There had been stars before. There had been Pelé, Zico, my favourite, Rivellino, my cousin. You never heard of Rivellino? There is an actual Brazilian World Cup winner called Rivellino. Yeah, my surname's Rivlin, in case you didn't get that. But those guys have been sort of squeaky clean Christian figures because the world hadn't got to sex symbols yet. But by this point they really have. And they people say Renato's basically a David Beckham figure or a George Best. Big shagger, but a bit of a sweetheart. Everyone loves him. And he played with Kaiser at Flamengo and Botafogo, and they become really close friends because Renato likes a party. But also they look almost identical. So we're looking at a picture of them here. So that's Kaiser on the left, Renato in the middle. So they've both got this kind of like wolf-like mullet haircut that I guess was cool then, and kind of having a bit of a comeback now, actually, in certain circles. And they both got like,
if you see this haircut in your neighbourhood, your rent is going up.
Yeah, this could be taken at like Frank's in Peckham.
Yeah.
Like, all three of these.
They're both wearing the same sort of like beer brand T-shirt, although Kaiser's gone sleeveless. And they've got sort of like same bone structure, I would say. They look alike.
Yeah.
And naturally, Kaiser turns this resemblance to his advantage. So he says, "My reign truly began from 1983 when I was compared to Renato. They called me Renato's clone. It was easy after that." Slightly sinister tones.
But they never teamed up. They never did a...
In what milieu?
He's pretended to beat him, so they can never be in the same place.
Well, they do sometimes, but then other times he'll do it. So, like, there's a story of a player was in a shopping mall, and they're like, "Oh, Renato Gaucho's here. He's doing autographs," and he gets there, and like, it's Kaiser. Slightly more nefariously, he would pretend to be him to get girls.
Yeah.
And he'd show them videos of Renato's goals and be like, "Yeah, it's me, Renato."
Who do you think you could pretend to be?
Zach. I think that's it.
We could pretend to be each other. It'd be good if the reveal at the end of this pod is like, there's actually one person that does
It's all been very cleverly cut for
Got one of those like Napa voice alteration tools. Didn't get very creative with it. Gave us rhyming names. Why? Who do you have someone who you think you could?
No, but I sometimes see those TikToks of people that get, because everyone's fucking vox popper now, so they stop people and they're like, "Who's your celebrity lookalike?" And then you have to say who people think you look like, and then they take a picture and they ask other people like, "Do you think this person looks like them?" And the one that I got ever in my life was Martine McCutcheon, and it upset me so much.
I used to really fancy her in EastEnders.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I think they were like, Love Actually Martine McCutcheon. She is hot, but like the whole thing is just like she's really fat.
Yeah,
and I was like,
it's not the idea. It's not bad.
I don't know who that is, to be honest.
She's EastEnders for many years. Tiff.
She shags Hugh Grant in Love Actually.
Oh yeah.
You seen Love Actually, Zach?
I've seen Love Actually.
Zach, Love Actually is a sort of Christmas British film starring a number of.
Do they show that at jazz festivals or what?
You saw the German opera version. So the womanizing, he's using videos of Renato's goals to get women. Older women would pay to sleep with Renato, not knowing that it's Kaiser.
Right.
How was that happening? Was he in the club pretending to be Renato and they'd come up and offer it to him? Or was he sort of touting himself around as just like a
phone box cards? Renato Gaucho.
I mean, he's got some contacts in the newspaper. He could probably put in a little...
Has own bus.
Yeah.
Willing to travel, not to away much.
Anyway, apparently there's loads of women who just like went to their graves believing that they slept with the great Renato Gaucho, and let them remain blissfully ignorant. I think
it's not really the same. But have you seen the Twitter account Shit London Guinness?
Yeah.
There's a guy, because I follow him on Twitter, and he keeps posting that like girls message the Instagram account being like, "Hey, I met you last night, I had a great time," and he's like, "That's not me."
Yeah.
So there's like someone going around London being like, "Yeah, I run Shit London Guinness," and getting.
Do you reckon he's getting laid from that?
Yeah.
God. Right. You don't need to be a professional footballer then.
That's what I mean. This is like, and he doesn't presumably have like.
But then if you want famous actresses and stuff, then you're also a gigolo for older women. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's an element with Kaiser as well. It's like he's got to make his fucking coin.
Well, he's getting paid.
Yeah, but he's not on a big contract, and he says like it's mainly about the signing on bonus because the wages don't last long.
Right.
So I think there's probably an element of like you got to cash this in for money sometimes.
I mean, it sounds like he's doing like uni club appearances almost.
Yeah,
like,
the equivalent. But it's kind of more esteemed circles. Maybe
he'd be on OnlyFans if it was today.
As Renato Gaucho. Apparently there's a story unconfirmed in Rio that actually there was a love child named after both Renato and Kaiser called Renato Kaiser.
Good name.
Mother, someone who's still not sure which one she slept with. I can clear that up for her. But in the book, Renato says, "Imagine my football skills and his mouth. He will be unstoppable."
But also, poor kid. Can you imagine being named after two people your mum might have shagged?
Yeah. Turns out it was neither of them.
If you're Renato, though, it's like quite a good way. Like if you kept getting accused of cheating, you could be like, "It's obviously not me, it's Kaiser." Like,
funny you say that because Renato gets in trouble with his wife because all these stories go around Rio of him like out philandering and partying and stuff, and he's like, "It's not me." Probably was him as well.
It's a different world. bad.
Yeah, he's probably using that again.
Yeah, you would start to use it to your advantage.
Great cover.
So many layers.
Yeah, there really are. There's actually one occasion where Kaiser turns up to the opening of this new, very exclusive nightclub, and he's like, "It's me, Renato Gaucho," and the guy's like, "Are you sure?" And he like produces some ID card that he's probably nicked out of Renato's bag, and he's like, "Look, it's me." And so the bouncer lets him in, VIP area, table, champagne, girls. 1 hour later, Renato Gaucho arrives at the club, and they're like, yeah, "Nice try, mate. He's upstairs, but you do look a bit like him, so well done." And he's like, "No, it's me." And they're like, "You're not coming in, pal." Huge argument. Eventually, Renato persuades the bouncer, "Can you just show me the guy who is supposed to be him?" So they go upstairs, and he points to him, and he's like, "I see what's happened here." And apparently they then confront him, and Kaiser just sneaks off and hides in the loo.
Was he annoyed? This is
No, apparently so apparently Renato, and he's interviewed widely in the doc, in the book, he just kind of loves it. He's like he lived the life.
This.
Gaucho is actually the one who coins the description, the greatest footballer to never play. They're like good friends. Okay, apparently Renato still now like sort of like gives him money and stuff.
It's so weird.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of like... So there's this thing, there's this concept in Rio called the malandra, which is like a sort of like cheeky, sort of trickster, gift of the gab guy who's like sort of pulling the wool over people's eyes, but it's kind of lovable. A rogue. It's a little bit Oliver Twist.
Like they're like Jack the Lad.
Yeah, but and it's kind of like, it's a legit thing, that a character that people love. And so like, Kaiser will tell these stories and they're like, who cares if it's true? They just love it. And he's fun, and he's got that bus. Never forget the bus. And maybe he did score that goal, and who knows? Yeah. And like, it is just easier to get away with shit like that before the internet, isn't it? Yeah. So anyway, Gaucho and him are genuinely close. And they're gallivanting around Rio together, just
in the bus,
having a laugh. I think the bus was involved.
After a while, though, Rio's football clubs do start to kind of see through this, and the opportunities begin to dry up in Brazil. So Kaiser has this brainwave, and he's like, there's plenty of foreign clubs there who'd be very impressed with my CV. Like, I've played with Fluminense, Botafogo, Flamengo. Like they'd love this. And he also had a couple of friends that were playing for Ajaccio, a team in Corsica who play in the French second division. And on his mate's recommendation, he manages to get a contract there. So the fans are super excited. They think that they're signing this Brazilian superstar who's, he scored in the under-20s World Cup final. And thousands of them turn up to his presentation. So Ajaccio have put on this open training session to present him to the fans. God. And Kaiser comes out wrapped in a Corsica flag, waving to the fans. He climbs into the stands and finds the president's wife, gives her a bunch of flowers, and the fans are going wild. But then he climbs back over and sees the pitch laid out for training with like balls everywhere, and he's like, oh fuck. Because he knows that as soon as they see him kick a ball, then they're going to realise he's a fraud. So he has an idea and starts just booting the balls into the crowd, just like waving to them, just like as if they're souvenirs. So the fans just take all of the balls, like run off. And eventually there's just one ball left, and the goalkeeper's like, no, Kaiser, like we need this for Sheenbrecht. So he's like, what? I don't speak French, grabs the ball, just boots it into the crowd. And that's it. So they've got no balls left. So they end up just having to do like a regular fitness training session, just jogging up and down.
Just have to go home.
Yeah.
So good.
And then, he pulls his old injury trick again. And quite quickly, his teammates decide that they're not a fan. The manager as well, because they've rumbled him really. They can see that he can't play football to save his life. But he's managed to really butter up the club president, who absolutely loves him. And he spends a lot of time just like hanging out in the club owner's office. And eventually he does manage to win over his teammates when he tells them a story about him and the owner. So he says that one time at the start of his time at the club, he went into the club owner's office, and this guy was like, "Sit down, Kaiser. I have a present for you. You can borrow my car." And he gives him the keys to his Ferrari. "And Kaiser, one more thing. You can borrow my secretary."
Oh.
And he points to his like glamorous blonde secretary.
Borrow.
Yeah,
Is she a mouse?
Very grim.
Yeah, Minnie Mouse.
Yeah, it's grim story. Don't shoot the messenger.
That's horrible.
So anyway, Kaiser's like recalling this story to his teammates, and he says that they're driving through the mountains of Corsica, and they pull up at this viewpoint, and they're making out, and Kaiser, he thinks he knows where this is ending, but the secretary says to him, "No, I can't. Like I'm on my period." So
This is like so much more detailed.
So Kaiser's telling this story to his teammates, and he delivers the punchline. He says, "So I told her, when the pitch is flooded, I shoot from behind the goal."
Which presumably they lap up.
And the lads go wild. So yeah, that's how he sort of endears himself to his teammates with this
Yeah, that's
horrible
very,
story.
very, very sweet and endearing story.
Yeah, it is really. But the only thing, it never happened. In fact, Kaiser never even set foot in Corsica. So the entire stint at Ajaccio was completely fabricated, with all of these backstories about the fans and, the stories with the club president climbing into the stand to give the flowers to his wife. He made it all up, but he just repeated and repeated and repeated these stories. And he did actually have a friend who played for Ajaccio, and this friend later admitted that they'd staged this photo shoot at a pitch in Brazil where Kaiser borrowed his club kit, and they took all these photos of him like doing kick-ups. They also took his club ID and forged a copy with Kaiser's face on it. So he basically created this entire stint for himself at this club in France.
Hang on, I have so many questions. Okay. Why would he make up a story where he's too scared to play, so he kicks the balls into the crowd?
So this is later.
Why would you?
Yeah, this is later. So like this. Okay, it gets very messy because. So basically, at the time when Kaiser gets back to Brazil from France,
right.
he never went to France at all. He has a friend who's this same tame journalist that he's got, knocks up an article in the Brazilian press that says he was top scorer for Ajaccio during that season. So at that point, his story is that he was good, that he genuinely played there, and it manages to bag him another club in Brazil, which we'll come on to. But later on, as we're going to discuss later, Kaiser's sort of post-career path is that he then creates, or he then
he dines out on the line.
He dines out on the fact that he's been conning these clubs out of a football career, basically.
Okay.
So this story that he tells about, kicking the balls into the crowd, blah blah blah, at Ajaccio, is the story that he later tells. It's the story that he tells in the documentary.
Right.
There basically comes a point, I think even in his late career, where like a lot of people are wise to the con.
Okay.
And at that point, like some of them he'll like tell it from the perspective of the con.
Okay.
Whereas the story of him like scoring goals, that's for getting in the media, that's to get the contract.
Yeah.
And that's basically the point of the France stint story, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So like
he needs a story to get Brazilian clubs to give him another deal.
But but where did he go?
I think he was just chilling in Brazil for
mum's house.
his mum's basement.
He was in
disappeared?
his basement studying his records.
Yeah.
His newspaper cutting, alphabetizing his
He
cuttings.
was in the National Libraries.
So I think by this point, he's been in and out of all of these clubs for so many years that he has friends he's mates with a lot of the players who'll put in good words for him. He's got these articles in the newspaper that say that he's been in France. He was top scorer in the French second division.
Also,
all of these different things.
It's not unique for clubs to sign players like who are kind of scamming them. I mean, there's Alex
Bebe.
Ferguson from Man United signed Bebe. They would say it was his worst transfer based off a video, and that was a disaster. But also there's this guy Ali Dia, this famous story in the 90s, who convinced Southampton that he was George Weah, one of the best players in the world's cousin, and they just signed him and played him for like 20 minutes, and then were like, this guy's never played football, get him off. So like it happens,
But you get the money then if they signed you?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. We'll do an episode on that at some point, actually, I think. People often ask for it. But like it's this idea of like you can trick people into signing you.
Right.
And he did. But he just needed some new because
he'd basically
exhausted
used
Brazil.
up all of his he'd played all his cards in Brazil, and he needed a new
Okay.
thing to add to his CV that would sort of give his career another boost. So he fictionalized this entire stint in Corsica where he was top scorer.
Pretty genius, actually.
And it works
it
because he then gets back to Brazil and it gives him this second life with all the clubs again. So he gets a contract with Flamengo, and obviously very quickly he settles back into his old routine of fake injuries. He also kills off his granny again to get out of training. I think he's probably got through about 7 or 8 grannies by this point.
It's quite like when you need to like get out of doing essays at uni and you're just like, oh, another one.
Yeah. Like, how many am I up to now?
Then you have to start doing like uncles and aunts and like cousins.
Yeah. But it works. I mean,
yeah. And fortunately for him, there are some new options opening up in Rio. So in 1988, he signs for Bangu, they're one of Rio's much smaller clubs, but they've been taken over by this gangster, Castor de Andrade, and he's bankrolling them to success. I guess it's a bit of a Man City type situation. Criminals. It's a bit of a Wrexham situation, like a relatively small club that are being bankrolled. And actually,
by
criminals?
criminal masterminds.
I just mean they're a small team.
They're taking Lively's husband.
She's got hands in all kinds of pies. So Castor de Andrade, this owner, he's a famed gangster. He officially makes his money from running an illegal lottery. Like, that's his cover story, even though it's illegal. But he's actually got his hands in far worse stuff, drug trafficking, all the good stuff. Right. And he's taken over this team and he's making all these big signings and they're actually like suddenly doing really well. But among the big signings is Kaiser, who sniffs out an opportunity. Naturally, he's there. And, most of the players are terrified of Andrade because he'll like chase referees off the pitch with a gun if they like make a decision he doesn't like. There's one story of he turns up to training and there's this player who's injured and Andrade just gets out his gun and fires the gun right next to on the floor next to the guy. And the guy jumps and he's like, you're clearly not injured then.
Why would he want to play for this club?
I know, well, money, I think. Yeah. And now once you've signed the deal with the devil, you're kind of trapped.
Yeah.
But actually, Kaiser, he gets on with really well. So Andrade loves Kaiser's like cheeky charisma and, of course, his access to beautiful women. And so apparently Kaiser's just always in Andrade's office, just like chatting, laughing. They're just like shooting the shit. But also he's got to pull his usual tricks. So on his first sort of month, he bribes one of the ball boys to bring all his friends from the favela and they come and chant Kaiser's name. So they're like, we want Kaiser. So and Andrade hears this and it's like, I've got a megastar on my hands. Yeah. Shame he's injured.
I was going to say, so then he comes out and like immediately falls over.
Yeah, so the old injury trick's out as always. Right. But Castor starts to get a bit impatient. He's like, I love this guy. The fans love him, but I haven't seen him play yet. And so eventually he goes to the manager and it's like, I want him in the squad. Like he's fit. Just put him in the squad. And so Kaiser is in a nightclub at 4 a.m. the night before the game. And somehow the manager tracks him down to there and calls him. And so the guy in the VIP area comes in and it's like, Mr. Kaiser, there's a call for you. Take him to the phone. And the manager's like, bad news, mate. I guess the manager's in on it.
I like that the manager just knows that it's 4 a.m. the night before the match. Where is Kaiser going to be?
Yeah, I know where to find him. Yeah. And obviously I know that he's just a scammer. Yeah. Manager's like, bad news, mate. You're in the squad. But don't worry, I've swung it so you'll be on the bench. I won't bring you on. It's fine. So the manager's fully involved. Anyway, so Kaiser's like, fuck's sake. According to the documentary, he goes straight from the nightclub to the ground in his jeans. Very hungover, straight through crew. And he's sitting on the bench, just like, fuck this. Got his sunglasses on, as always. And Bangu go 2-0 down. And Castor's like, right, that's it. I want Kaiser. So on his walkie-talkie, he tells the manager, bring him on. I don't care, just get him on. So the manager's like, sorry, mate, you're up. And Kaiser's like, oh, fuck, it's finally going to happen. And worst of all, it's at a team owned by a fucking gangster. Yeah. And so he starts warming up in front of the fans and he's like really trying to consider his options. And the fans behind him, the opposition fans, are abusing him. And he's like, bingo. So he turns around, climbs the fence and jumps into the crowd and just starts a fight, punches a fan in the face, just knocks him to the ground. And the referee's just like, what the fuck? Runs over and sends him off. So he can't come on.
Right.
So problem solved in a sense. You're not going to play.
I like that he'd rather throw himself into a crowd of terrifying Brazilian ultras than play the final 20 minutes against like some 4th division side.
Dedication to the bit. Yeah. Anyway, so he's kind of solved his problem in the sense he's not going to have to play, but understandably, Castor de Andrade is a bit pissed off about this. So Kaiser goes back to the dressing room, waits for the final whistle, and he's like, oh, fuck, how am I going to deal with this? And Castor marches in. He's flanked by 2 henchmen. He's got a gun in his hand, and he's like, you fuck with me! You fuck with me! And he's like, oh shit, what do I do? And he's just like, boss, let me speak. Please, can I just speak? And he's like, okay. And he goes, boss, I cannot let the fans abuse you. They called you a criminal, a villain, a drug trafficker. But you are incredible. You're the father I never had. My contract, it has 2 weeks left. It's up in a fortnight. And when it's finished, I'll be gone. You can get rid of me. You'll never see me again. And the dressing room falls into total silence. Everyone's like, oh, which way will it go? Castor's like tickling his gun in his pocket. And finally he looks at him, walks towards him, just grabs him on the cheeks, kisses him. And he says, I'm extending your contract by 3 months and doubling your pay.
This definitely happened.
This happened. There are witnesses. Bangu confirmed that he was there all this time.
That's more unbelievable than the French thing.
Yeah, but the French thing's a
It's like-
device for the career, whereas
Yeah.
this is pure living on the edge con artistry.
Mental.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, he manages to string Bangu along for a whole year. He's obviously got the president in his pocket by this point. But eventually his next opportunity presents itself. So Castor, the owner of Bangu, manages to help one of his co-lottery crooks, a guy called Emil Pinheiro, to buy Botafogo. And apparently Castro owes Emil a lot of money. So as part of this deal, he also gives Botafogo loads of players from Bangu, including Kaiser.
Got a great striker.
Honestly, you're going to love him. He was top scorer in the French division. Scored in the Under-20 World Cup final.
He's got
honestly,
this great story about a Ferrari.
Anyway, he has the documents. I'll let him fill in the rest.
Do you need a bust?
that was maybe the dud part of the deal. But in Brazilian football, Emil Pinheiro is most famous not for owning Botafogo, but for his bionic cock. So, just for a bit of context, Emil Pinheiro he's an older gentleman, and this was the days before Viagra. So, he was incredibly horny older man, and he decided that he would get a prosthetic penis, basically. Which, if you're going to do that, then you may as well get a biggie, right?
But he has his own penis.
I don't know, actually.
Yeah, I think he does, but it doesn't work, so he can't shag, and so he
gets a prosthetic.
Yeah, it's a strap-
basically a
he's
strap
bought
on.
it
Yeah.
And what, does he go?
But he wears it all the time. Like, this is. I
does he
think
go,
it's like.
"Oh, is it-
I think it's a permanent thing. Maybe he can take it off. I don't know.
And it's a monster.
It's a monster. So there's one player who recalled Emil would wear these baggy trousers, so his thing was kind of swaying. It looked like a piece of wood.
Because it's probably quite rudimentary, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like
There are
a wooden
Yeah,
cock.
I'd love to believe that it's like surgically attached to him, but I'm like, I don't think they had that technology.
Yeah, I
in the
don't know.
probably
Maybe
a
it's
lot of
just sort of a
duct tape.
belt.
Yeah, like at the end of like Boogie Nights.
They have clips of it in the documentary as
Yeah,
well.
there's
It's
some
why I
really
was
good
watching
clip.
the
You
doc
see it
just
in
for
the
that.
trousers in the dog.
Really, and is
Yeah.
it like?
It's a big.
It's a big thing. and
It's
he-
a rolling pin.
it's it looks like I don't know. There's like a ferret up his trousers or something.
Right.
But
I am picturing it is literally just a wooden sculpture
Yeah,
of a penis.
It must be.
Like in sex ed at school, we had that. Instead of a banana, they just rolled a condom on this like wooden cock. Yeah, it was quite lifelike.
Was it like? Did it have?
It had a head, yeah.
Oh,
As I imagine does Emil's.
yeah.
Yeah. Mickey actually said that in industry, because they use quite a lot of prosthetic dicks, they have full frontal and no one wants to do it. He's like, there's a woman whose job it is, that her job is prosthetic penises. And apparently it's really annoying because the actors always want to choose like stupidly big ones. They're like, it's not realistic. Can you stop giving them 12-inch options?
Yeah, apparently Mark Wahlberg kept his one from Boogie Nights, but like because it's like from the 90s and probably prosthetic penises have come on since then, he says it's like slowly rotted. So like he has it in his house and like just bits fall off.
In like a jar, like, you know, that picture of Rasputin's dick.
Just like a pickle like in the fridge.
Formaldehyde in the fridge.
he was very keen to show it off though. So in press conferences, journalists would confront him with these questions like, Botafogo's in crisis, what's going on? And he'd stand up, grab his cock and say, the crisis is here.
Not exactly sure what that even means.
No, I don't, not entirely sure. Anyway, it's no use having something like that if you can't use it. And that's where Kaiser came in handy. So Kaiser would take Emil Pinero along to these nightclubs, introduce him to women, and then stay partying with him for the whole night. Or in Kaiser's trademark poetic terms, it was a non-stop slut bonanza.
Oh,
God. Again, language at the time.
yeah. Every time I feel sorry for him or I like him, he ruins it for me.
Yeah.
But I just think that's language at the time.
Is it?
But this is from
It might be a translation thing.
I think this is him recalling it like in 20,
yeah. Good point.
2017
On
or
Amazon
something.
Prime.
Good point. Yeah. Post Me Too. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, he keeps on getting these contract extensions at Botafogo
Hang on,
because
sorry. When you're like, he has to help, so he goes out partying with him. You still can't use the
Yeah, as in,
bionic
what's the point?
What's the point in him having
He likes
it?
to give pleasure to others.
yeah.
Maybe he's just psychologically getting off on it.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. It's
so
a poor
strange.
substitute.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a sort of status thing, having this
Yeah.
huge.
Why does
schlong
everyone
hanging out of
in
your trousers.
this area of Brazil go like so far with like, why can't you just like pretend in a normal way?
I don't know. They're extreme characters.
Yeah, it's like a pantomime.
Yeah. I mean, prosthetic
Yeah.
knobs, bionic cocks.
They are sort of kindred spirits, actually. Him and
Yeah.
Kaiser,
What, 'cause
just
they're both living a lie?
living their fantasy.
Soulmates.
Is he borrowing the cock?
Yeah.
Well, and that strings out the Botafogo era, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the president keeps on just renewing his contract because he's a good time.
Now, how long is he there for?
I think another year.
Oh god.
Yeah. And and this is like, we're talking late 80s now. Like, he's partying hard in Rio, but like the reputation's growing because after many years of meeting this guy in a club, you know, you're like, who is this guy? And apparently he starts to mix it in some quite interesting circles. So some of the stories he tells, I think we can disregard. Like, he tells teammates that he had orgies with Berlusconi.
I don't know if you can discuss. That's actually probably one of the more believable ones.
Well, again,
Yeah, I
kindred
mean,
spirits.
if he's going to orgies with Emil Pinero, the president of Botafogo, then I wouldn't put it past. I wouldn't put it past
him.
Berlusconi
He says he
to
was
pop
offered
up
roles in porn films, which I believe.
Yeah, that happens to people now.
But also, but on a more sort of like day-to-day level, he's just like schmoozing all these journos and media, and like he's getting all this newspaper coverage, you know, just like this great star. And then one night he's in a club with one of the producers of Mesa Redonda, which is Brazil's match of the day. It's just like the biggest football program in Brazil. And like, you know, it's Brazil, so it's slightly less formal than match of the day.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a like, you bring on players, they talk a bit of punditry, and then they like tell a few old war stories. And they book Kaiser, and he's like, yeah, great, I'll come on. Sort of rate Flamengo's prospects in the upcoming derby. And then on national TV, on the biggest show in Brazil, Kaiser looks straight to the camera and he tells the story of his arrival at Ajaccio and the gift he received from his chairman. And he delivers the punchline on television. We've got a clip of it, we'll watch in a sec.
God.
He says, I told her, when the pitch is flooded, I shoot from behind the goal. And the whole panel just like collapse in hysterics. They're just loving it, these men.
Oh, they're all men.
Oh, yeah. This is in the 80s.
Can you imagine that on Match of the Day?
I know.
Jermaine Genius all over it.
It's crazy. He then, on the programme, he then gives them an Ajaccio shirt.
Jesus
Which
Christ.
he obviously
It's his
tells
mate's shirt.
from his mate. He's
Yeah.
looking quite late 80s Rolling Stones, actually.
Yeah. Or like Rod Stewart.
Yeah. Who also now looks like a nan.
Yeah, so by 1989, his career is kind of winding down. He's doing these TV cameos, but he does manage to get a contract with Vasco da Gama, where he's playing alongside the future World Cup winners Ricardo Roca and Bebeto. So Bebeto recalls having training sessions with him. He says, Kaiser was completely out of his depth. He would be dashing from one end to the other, sweating loads. He was knackered before training even started. One day we just said, get out, Kaiser, or otherwise we'll end up killing you.
Oh.
By this point, his fitness is worse than ever, and his injury crisis is just going from bad to worse. And Vasco da Gama, eventually, you know, they've tried everything, but whatever they do, he keeps on having this niggling calf injury that just won't go away. So they're at their wits' end, and eventually they decide to bring in a black magic guy to sort of see if that'll do the trick. But after a couple of sessions of this guy sort of, you know, massaging him and doing charms or whatever it is he does, Kaiser pulls the guy aside and he says, look, take your money, mate. Nothing's wrong with me. Take your money and don't bother doing your work because I intend to stay injured for the rest of my life. and he does. So Vasco eventually kind of pulled the plug on his contract, and Kaiser signs in 1989 for El Paso Six Shooters, who are an indoor football team in the USA. So I think he's probably found his level now.
Yeah.
Scraping the barrel. Yeah. Although USA, baby.
Yeah, USA.
Texas.
So he does actually play for them, but
Oh God, they're that bad.
yeah, they're that bad, and he's that bad. So they lose every match that he plays, including one 27-3. Apparently, in the 12 matches that he plays for them, they concede 179 goals.
Jesus. What were they like before?
I
Still
don't
pretty
know.
shit.
Yeah, they folded the season after as well. I saw on Wikipedia. He actually says that he didn't enjoy the spell in the USA. Possibly
Really?
because his con wasn't really like being an indoor soccer player in El Paso in 1989.
Yeah, like, do people care?
Doesn't really get you much.
No.
Yeah.
Much
Also,
of
he actually had to play football.
Yeah,
had
maybe
to have a
fucking
job.
play. He actually retires in 1992. Apparently, there is one last spell back at Botafogo, which is just mental. Right? Maybe
He's been there about 4 times.
Yeah,
now.
maybe
Give
they
it
needed
another
his
go.
other talents were required. Need that bus. So he comes back for a bit, but then he finally hangs up his boots in 92. I think by this point it's like he's too old to even keep up
Yeah.
the lie. And these days he's actually a personal trainer, exclusively for women. Got a picture of him here with a client.
Right. He's not even looking in her eyes.
Yeah,
I would
I think he's looking at her cleavage, I would say.
He's gone quite Ozzy Osbourne now.
He has a bit, hasn't he? He actually looks a bit like Maradona does post-retirement.
Yeah.
Which is like, there is a sad quality to it.
Yeah,
But he's still in with like the big name players. So in recent years, Romario, the great Brazilian striker, he was involved in a car accident. And the next day in the newspapers, there were these reports that Romario wasn't driving, someone else was driving.
Oh, no.
And there were even photos of Romario's driver in front of the car posed up for the press. And it's Kaiser, which is funny because Kaiser can't drive apparently, and these days he's partially sighted, so he can't really see. So it's unlikely Kaiser was driving the car, but you know.
So he's taking the fall again.
You scratch my back.
Yeah.
Romario is now a senator, so he's a big dog in Brazilian politics. So
I guess I wonder why if Kaiser like had that very, very funny joke on the TV program, why would you not be like, I'm just going to become a pundit?
well, I think these days he sort of milks the Kaiser story. So obviously there's been the film.
has kind
in
of.
Brazil, there's like, you know, he's now famous for his scam.
Yeah.
So he's sort of a personality. And I think he milks that quite hard. So like when the documentary came out, he got massive round of publicity.
Right.
He then told the Sun that he was dating a transgender favela funk star. And so the Sun like sent
Funk.
Favela funk is like a genre,
right.
apparently. Might not be doing it justice.
Right.
So then he got like loads of publicity for that. Like he's a bit of a master of just like
Yeah.
a bit of a Katie Price in that respect, kind of. Obviously, some people still believe his scam and refuse to believe it was all a con. So the documentary tracks down his ex-girlfriend, Valeria Gallo, who went out with him for a while, and she's a sort of glamorous woman. They sort of bring her in front of one of his old apartments, and they're like, you know, did you ever watch him play? And she says, only ever on video, but there was this really famous goal against Flamengo where he scored this dribbling run, and you know, it's that famous goal we talked about earlier. And she says, did you not know about that? I still have the videotape he gave me. It's worth its weight in gold because no one even has it anymore. It was him. I'm sure it was. And they're like, do you think maybe it wasn't him? And she's just like, no. Like, obviously this is like her story.
She's
Like, I
been
used to go out with-
been dining out on
Yeah.
this as well.
Yeah.
I went out with the great Kaiser. So
I
she
think
just,
you would hold on to it.
yeah, I choose to believe, I think is the response there. And you know, it's not totally clear exactly which details are true. So like we know Ajaccio clearly didn't happen. And it's only during the making of the documentary that he finally comes clean about that. And obviously he's created, part of his legend is like him telling lies to con people. So like, you know, there are stories about cons, but we do know for sure he was at a number of Brazilian clubs. There are records of him there. There are records of the clubs reporting his injuries to the Brazilian league. Multiple players confirm he was at those clubs. Bangu themselves, that club, and a number of others have been like, yep, he was on our books. Like the whole thing with the
Right.
gangster happened. His Wikipedia entry is quite fun because it's got a list of his clubs and always 0 appearances.
His Wikipedia is so confused. That's the only thing that I looked at before I came
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I was just like, no idea.
Yeah,
what's
so
happening.
I like it's possible that the odd detail and spell here and there is invented, but like the stories we've told are true.
They stitched him up in the documentary because when it comes clean that he's been lying about certain parts of this story, it then cuts to the part where he's like, "Yeah, I slept with over 1,000 women."
And they're like, did you? The documentary has a I don't want to like spoil it, but like the last 20 minutes are like pretty interesting as
Yeah.
he's sort of confronted and
Yeah.
He's such an interesting character because his entire life has been living through these different stages of con artistry. Like during his football career, it was living off this false football career. It was always like, oh, the last club that I played for, I did this. The last club, but
Yeah.
nobody actually saw him play. And then after that, he's now made this like second career out of the legend that he'd conned these football clubs. And you're then like, hold on, how many parts of this story are actually
like
true?
Shutter Island.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has a lot of twists and turns.
But look, he
and
was on the
levels.
books of
Yeah.
these teams. These stories did happen.
Yeah.
I choose to believe that it's a slightly more fun story in the sense that like he had a wild ride. I think, like some of the
for sure.
some of the ways he speaks about women feel dated.
Yeah.
But I think it was a wild ride. Obviously, it's like
Yeah.
over to an extent for him, although he's got his personal training. But obviously, he's also like got some strange issues that he's
Yeah.
living out.
And he's alive. He's still
Yeah, alive and well,
thriving.
living in Rio. You can
Right.
donate to his crowdfunder, probably, should you wish.
You could sign up to his training regime.
All right, well, I think that's probably all there is to say. It's a rip-roaring tale that leaves you with as many questions as answers and sort of questioning various aspects of morality in 1980s.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a really fun one. So thanks, Rose.
Thank you. I'm still confused, but thanks for
Yeah,
having
it's
me.
good. It's good to. That's part of the con. Be a bit confused. He bewilders you.
Then you're just going to pull off a mask now and you are Kaiser.
Yeah, the greatest trick the Kaiser ever pulled. I was thinking he didn't exist. Let us know what you think on that one. Share it with your friends. And do check out the documentary and the book. I think they're both called Kaiser, the greatest footballer to never play football. And yeah, the doc's on Amazon Prime, the book's on all good booksellers, and probably in Kaiser's bum bag, laminated and highly edited, redacted. Check it out. Thanks a lot to the people who produced those. Thanks, Zach,
Thank you.
and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.